Hearts of Iron 4, Paradox's undisputed biggest game of all time, and yet one I have probably covered the absolute least. Well, enough of that, because in this video, we're diving deep into the community aspects of this titan, namely the biggest mods out there. Because even though Hearts of Iron 4 is all about World War II, modders have taken this foundation and turned it into so many completely different things that have absolutely nothing to do with the war itself, at least as it happened. In this video then, we are going through the biggest and best total conversion mods for Hearts of Iron 4 out there, and if that tickles your fancy, make sure to keep watching, leave a like on this video, and consider subscribing to the channel. And with that, let's get to it. The first mod on this list is here for a special reason, not just because it is amazing, not just because it fittingly offers the earliest time period in a total conversion mod on this list, but because it comes with an important message. Last year, Imperialism, a modder on End of a New Beginning, died of a heart attack. Life is unpredictable, and I wanted to tell every one of you watching this to take care of yourself, eat healthy, and to treasure your friends and loved ones, as I'm certain the modding team treasured their friend. Thanks to everyone involved, we have the incredible End of a New Beginning, a mod that takes on the 19th century Imperial era and roughly the same time period as Victoria 2 and 3. End of a New Beginning is all about immersing you into the height of European imperial power, of the British dominance of the seas, of the French attempt to recoup their empire after Napoleon, of German unification under Prussia, of Ottoman decline, of Japanese ascendancy, and begins not even a decade before the American Civil War, where you will have the choice of which way to take the young Union. This mod features an entirely new economic system, a political decision system related to your budget, with various levers depending on your legislative power, entirely new decisions tailored to your nation, new focus trees for quite honestly just about every nation I could find, which makes this mod incredibly replayable, a gorgeous map that fits the time period, a brilliant new UI, and a soundtrack that draws you in further. Despite the mod not having as fleshed out focus trees for everyone, it certainly is one of the most all-encompassing mods out there and does an incredible job of immersing you into its Victorian era. And for that, End of a New Beginning deserves all this praise and more. The second mod on this list is here for a reason, and it's because I fell in love with it instantly and at a time when I was kind of losing a bit of interest in the game itself. And it is of course The Fire Rises. The Fire Rises is a fairly new total conversion mod being released in October 2024, but that doesn't mean it's anything to scoff at. With 12 nations with unique focus trees and events, The Fire Rises takes place in our own era, beginning on January 1st, 2020. What struck me immediately was not only how well and truly flavorful this mod is, but also how funny and terrifying it is. I decided to begin as France, my leader being Emmanuel Macron. France begins the game with challenges left and right, not only dealing with the Yellow Vest uprisings, but also a fairly unruly military general staff, COVID-19 being a present and imminent threat, and an election coming up in only 2 years, one between Macron's center liberals and the right-wing populists of Le Pen. Since I obviously wanted to take the European Union route of democracy, freedom and liberty, I chose to stick with Macron, not only dealing masterfully with the pandemic, but doing so while juggling a civil war in Saudi Arabia where I sent volunteer forces. One of the things I appreciate the most with The Fire Rises, and what's partly its secret sauce, is that its focus trees fill out dynamically and in response to your choices and scripted events. While it looks small in the beginning, it quickly fills out over time, and it does so with some of the best made and good-looking focus icons I've ever seen. The entire UI is flawlessly gorgeous, by the way, giving a mix between a retro and modern look that feels appropriate, including pop-up events that look like internet pages and which sometimes sound like iOS notifications. I mentioned that the mod was funny, and that's because it dares to make fun where it can. Most people understand Macron as being a bit of a Napoleon wannabe perhaps, and indeed, if you take him to electoral victory, you get these choices of which Roman god Macron should compare himself to in order to get certain bonuses. And in an event, you have Macron ponder on changing the French flag to be just a tiny bit darker shade of blue. He's me for real, but these make for such incredibly charming and funny moments. And I honestly don't think I've ever laughed out loud in a Hearts of Iron game before. The AI has a personality too, of course, and in my game, the American AI chose to support Donald Trump. Despite Biden winning the 2020 elections, the AI fermented rebellion behind the scenes, and the entire country quickly erupted into a second American Civil War between various liberty-loving democratic factions and fascistic and Nazi neckbeard alliances, even including gangs like the KKK, Cribs, and MS-13 in it, tanking the global financial markets. That's right, the Fire Risers has a completely new economic system underneath it, with buildings and things like oil prices now having an impact on your finances. I would say though that the mod should change who the leaders of the countries are, because in countries like Norway, the UK, and Sweden, it's kinda weird to always see the head of state rather than the actual prime minister. Because even though it's correct that King Harald is the head of state in Norway, he's definitely not in charge of the country, and it feels wrong for the mod to highlight the constitutional monarchs as leaders instead of the prime ministers. Overall though, that is a small blemish on an otherwise amazing experience. I could say so much more, and I'll probably make a standalone review of this mod later on, but for now, this is an absolutely incredible total conversion mod that puts immersion, what-if scenarios, and details first, and I highly recommend it. Our next mod is the New Order Last Days of Europe. Returning to a World War II type scenario now, and to arguably its darkest one yet, a world where the Axis powers won the Second World War. Don't go thinking this is some LARPing power trip fantasy though, because this mod both has the air of realism about it and is extremely well written. The entire world is cloaked in this dark atmosphere, the oceans being completely black as the majority of the world has fallen under despotic and tyrannical rule, and despite there still existing liberal or socialist holdouts like in India and Australia, the American continent is the world's last hope for freedom. Victorious Germany isn't necessarily doing all that well though, as its stagnating economy and security threaten its stability, all the while Japan's assassins are trying to out Hitler once and for all. Of course, this mod begins in an alternative 1962, and even though it might look like it, this isn't your grandmother's 60s. In the United States, a string of different presidential wins resulted in the formation of the Republican Democrats, led by Richard Nixon, who's already begun his term with dirty tactics against the opposition. As the leader of the free world, but with an ailing economic future and a nation that still struggles with the question of Jim Crow apartheid, even the future of America looks dim at best. Again though, I want to credit the writing team on TNO. The mod just reads so extremely well. Reading through the American focuses is like reading the inner thoughts of a Nixon campaign strategist, or indeed his own inner mind, getting angrier and angrier at the thought of Kennedy's Civil Rights Act overshadowing his own resolution to the question of race in America. It's so well written that I find myself smiling, and it adds to the deep sense of immersion this mod embodies. Many of the playable factions with flavor content has wholly unique mechanics related to them as well, like the amazing simulation of the American electoral system and elections, which makes this campaign a downright political thriller, the Japanese Imperial Diet, where maintaining support is crucial for the stability of the empire, and so on, with many unique focus trees and decision systems for the important states like the Italian, British, and German ones, with many planned expansions coming in the future. I love the dark vibe and soundtrack this mod brings, and it does indeed immerse you into its claustrophobic and alternative Cold War timeline. I will say that even though I understand what the mod attempts to achieve with its new 1960s computer-style UI, I quite dislike how unclear it can be and how uneasy it is on the eyes. Mostly in the research tree and notifications department, and I think it could have accomplished something similar, perhaps without being so contrasty and at times tough to read. On the other hand, the work put into making the focus tree icons and unique decisions so beautiful is appreciated, and overall, the New Order is a must-play mod for any alt history fan. Our next pick, and one of my favorites, is Pax Britannica, an Imperial timeline. In this world, the American Revolution failed. Queen Victoria became half human, half machine through Nikola Tesla's electrical genius, and the Great War occurred mostly between the British-led imperial powers and the Bourbon dynasties of continental powers like France and Spain. This presents us with a vastly different world, one where Britain remains the dominant power in 1933. The United Kingdoms of Germany has become an empire with a liberal bent but rising political instability, a despotic and revanchist French state thirsting for a new chance at war, and not a United States but a united Commonwealth of America, where you will have the ability to either stick with Britain and their empire, take it over for yourself alongside other colonies, or attempt a second American Revolution. Pax Britannica is just so well made, and I love everything from its new map design, which feels like a mix between HOI4 and the Victoria 2 map, and the tech research tree, despite feeling similar to vanilla, has received a minor but welcome visual update. What makes each major nation feel so unique, however, is the focus not just on beautiful, fleshed out and immersive focus trees, but also the complete unique faction flavor for each one. While Britain and America shares a system of imperial power struggle within the empire, the Germans must take extra care to ensure the stability of their realm so as to keep the Federation intact, and perhaps even expand their borders too. France, with its massive focus tree of 266 focuses, must also take care to balance and unify its military in order to achieve its revanchist aims. The Russian Empire must battle internally for scientific directions and stake its claim as a leading empire in the new century, and much more, with even more content planned. I think this time period, an alternative version of the 1930s, is extremely interesting, and admire the dedication that's gone into creating something that feels so natural within the Hearts of Iron 4 formula, and I commend the modders behind Pax Britannica. In other words, make sure to check this one out. Mod number 5 is something completely different, namely Equestria at War. If you had your wishes but doubts that the My Little Pony universe would feature in a Hearts of Iron 4 setting, then you can calm your horses, because that is exactly what Equestria at War does. Here, we have 3 different continents housing numerous furry-type factions, from ponies to polar bears, stags, different types of birds, and more. But the most important are likely Equestria itself, who values the magic of friendship above all, the Democratic Coalition of the Crystal Empire, the Soviet Republic of Stalingrad, who is currently facing lacking industrialization and food, and the supremacist changeling lands, led by their powerful Queen Chrysalis. And yes, this is the real deal. With all new focus trees tailored to your nation, new cabinet members, a complete tome of knowledge where you can read up on the various cities and peoples of this world, and of course, all new pony 3D models, this is the most complete My Little Pony War simulator on the market. Another fantasy-inspired mod is another impressive one, namely Lord of the Rings mod, and I'll admit, I never thought I'd see Middle-earth represented in Hearts of Iron 4, but here we are. While I do believe there are other games better suited for a Lord of the Rings playthrough, this mod is surprisingly well made. It comes with a beautiful upper layer map of Middle-earth, which separates it completely from vanilla HOI4, and even though some important cities are still missing unique city models, places like Isengard and Barad-dûr do have them. Even though it's not finished and completely overhauled, what's cool about this mod is how much detail has gone into tailoring the UI to this universe. You'll see immersive icons for production items, all new building icons, and one of the best adapted research UIs I've seen in a mod for this game, because they're both immersive yet easy on the eyes at the same time. The same goes for the focus trees, which are adapted to each nation, and with mostly beautiful new icons for each focus, despite the odd suitcase remaining too. The Lord of the Rings mod is quite awesome then. So if you prefer Hearts of Iron 4's gameplay, but want to experience it in a more fantastical setting, then this might be the mod for you. Coming up is one of the most famous mods on the workshop, and it's none other than Kaiserreich. Set in another alternate universe, this time we're not in a post-World War II century, but in an alternate post-World War I timeline, where the Central Powers won. This means that the Central Powers are the ones to deal with a sense of stagnation and insecurity, while the tumultuous results of the Great War led to revolutions in both Britain and France, leading to syndicalist governments. This is a fun and exciting type of historical switcheroo you haven't seen elsewhere in the same way, and it's particularly fun that empires like the Ottoman, or a kind of looser Austrian Empire Union of sorts, still remains. The fact that Kaiserreich takes place in 1936 means that the tech tree is the same actually, which is quite nice honestly, because if you're not that keen on learning a bunch of new technologies and what to research, it'll feel very familiar. For one of the more fleshed out and content-filled mods on this list then, Kaiserreich is definitely one to try. Cold War Iron Curtain is pretty self-explanatory, but that doesn't mean it's simple. This is a pretty much all-encompassing mod of the Cold War era, and it comes in 3 start dates with various amounts of content. We have the early Cold War beginning in 1949, the height of the Cold War taking place during the 1960s, and the oil crisis start date beginning in 1973. In other words, depending on the type of Cold War scenario you want, this is pretty much the complete package. Cold War Iron Curtain offers unique focus trees, mechanics, and decisions for a bunch of nations, but the amount of new unique content does vary heavily depending on the time period you choose, and even though especially the US has a good amount of content, the mod feels a tad unfinished in this department in terms of flavor for a decent amount of nations. The last update came in December of 2024 after all, so whether we'll see any more content is questionable. However, what's here is great, and if you want the closest thing to a historical Cold War experience in Hearts of Iron 4, this is probably it. For a different type of Cold War experience though, I highly recommend the alternative history mod Red Dusk, which is extremely interesting and well done for the factions it currently covers, which at this time includes the Soviet Union, the United States, the United Kingdom, Yugoslavia, Saddam's Iraq, the Socialist Republic of Vietnam, and the Republic of South Africa. What I love so much about this mod is much the same as why I love the Fire Rises or TNO. It's that feeling of being in an airy but not too unfamiliar version of our world, but one that perhaps can be corrected if done well. However, contrary to taking place during our own time or an alternate world or Cold War, the Red Dusk introduces an alternate take on the turn of the millennia. Beginning in the year 2000, this is a world where the core of the Soviet Union never fell, where Gorbachev and Yeltsin were removed instead of allowed to bring a new future for Russia. That doesn't necessarily mean much though. The USSR lost much of Eastern Europe to democracy and freedom, while the stagnation and economic downturns of the past decades continue to linger on. In the United Kingdom, Tony Blair has led New Labour to victory, and as part of the EU and after German unification, it seems perhaps that the future is bright for the old war-torn continent. However, much like in the crumbling USSR, the US is also experiencing a period of stagnation. Led now by Republican Dan Quayle instead of Bill Clinton, the US finds itself in a political reality where three parties command control, with the Social Democratic Reform Party backed by almost a third of the voters. This makes for a contested Congress with gridlocks everywhere. All the while, you must decide whether to continue the Cold War or look elsewhere. Including the smaller but significant for the time period nations of South Africa and Iraq is also an interesting choice and can make for some truly unique playthroughs all over the world. Unique and beautiful focus trees everywhere elevates the mod to new heights, and special systems in the decision menus do the same. I also appreciate how clear the research UI is, by the way. With even more playable nations with unique focus trees and events, this mod will be even better in the future. You'll also notice that the mod uses the same map as the one in TNO, which does look good, but can perhaps feel a tad too dark for a time period that, despite it all, is not completely engulfed by Nazis. In other words, Red Dusk is a unique and extremely well-made modern-day alternative history mod, and you owe it to yourself to check it out. If you'd like a mod that feels more true to actual history though, this next one honestly needs no introduction, namely Millennium Dawn. Millennium also begins in the year 2000, but now as it actually happened, meaning you'll see all of the familiar faces. As Millennium Dawn is one of the largest mods on the workshop, you're also going to experience that almost every nation has something unique to offer here, from the largest nations like the US, China, India, and Germany, to smaller nations like Canada, Belgium, and Norway. And I mean, this mod is absolutely massive in scope. Its focus trees are some of the largest you'll ever see. Even for the non-major powers, there is an entire sub-mechanic for the European Union and NATO membership, entirely new decision systems, a new political system of ideologies, a new economic system, and just so much more. Millennium Dawn is one of the most famous mods on the workshop for good reason, and now you know why. World War I is rarely represented in video games, but don't fret, the Hearts of Iron 4 modders got you covered with Hearts of Iron 4 The Great War. This is World War I as you remember it, and gives you the opportunity to once more play an actual historical game, almost as it was intended, just about 20 years before the original start date. This is an age of empires and possibly also their fall, but what's interesting is that the Great War doesn't just let you start before the war, it actually lets you begin in the interwar period after the war as well. Meaning that whether you begin in 1910, 1914, or 1919, you'll have a bunch of interesting scenarios with either pre, during, or interwar focuses to focus on. This mod is quite vanilla friendly honestly, with not that many crazy new mechanics or systems like some of the other mods on this list, and so if that's your cup of tea, it's also for the better, and it won't really take any time at all getting into this mod if you are already familiar with how HOI4 works normally. This next one is very interesting indeed, especially as a thematic contrast to the last one, as Age of Imperialism is a mod that takes place in an alternative 1931, but a 1931 where the Great War never even happened in the first place. That means that we're still in an age of imperialism, where the great powers of Britain and Germany are ascendant, Russia remains a massive powerhouse, while France and the US, at least so far, never managed to quite reach the heights of their historical counterparts, especially as France never managed to get revenge for the Franco-Prussian Wars. In a word, what this mod manages so well, and it's a word you've heard a few times already, is immersion. From the incredible focus trees, to the look of the window itself with the Art Deco style, from the beautiful music in the Imperialist radio submod, everything comes together so well. This is indeed an age of empires, but don't take the lack of a World War I as evidence of no conflict. On the contrary, if 1914 was a powder keg, this just might be a nuclear bomb, as the mightiest empires of all time will soon face each other head-on. The question now is only what the alliances might be, and which side you will be on. I also find it very interesting how in a time of no war and no Great Depression for these states, that old Adolf is actually not a possible part of Germany's focus tree, but of Austria's, an Austrian empire by the way, which has fallen firmly under Germany's shadow. If you want something completely unique then, but a mod that still takes inspiration from the historical pre- and interwar time periods, then Age of Imperialism is a must-try. Perhaps the strangest mod on this list, especially if you're going for a France playthrough, is Red Flood, yet another post-World War I alternative history mod, but this time, socialists and accelerationists have upset the balance of power in Europe, leading successful revolutions and wars against the old regimes. Europe is now split between powerful socialist and monarchical states. The Russian Empire is fractured into an imperial core and a number of subjects of variable might. India is divided between free Indian states and a reluctant authoritarian British colony ruled by Winston Churchill, and so much more is going on around the world. There are quite a few nations of interest here, even though they're not all necessarily up to date with the latest focus trees the mod has implemented. But there is more than enough here for the relevant states to spend quite a lot of time in this universe, and so if you are up for an interesting, relatively dark, and sometimes quite absurd vision of the 1930s, then look no further than the Red Flood. It's a tight race for the most post-apocalyptic and dystopian universes on this list, but few challenge the awful universe of Old World Blues, a mod taking place in the universe of Fallout. Taking place in Western America, including Mexico and parts of Western Canada, this is as real and as dedicated a strategy experience you'll get in this universe, and everything from the music to the UI, including focus trees and decisions, faction leaders, and just about everything else has been perfectly tailored to this experience. You won't be seeing much of the capital wasteland around these parts, but if you want to take a trip to the west and experience all it has to show you in this dark, dreary, yet mysterious and extremely well-made mod, Old World Blues is as worthy of your time as the best of them. Lastly, I want to give an honorary mention to two mods. The first is the mod 1984, which takes place in the titular universe, a mod which looks to be really well done but as of now does not sport the most amount of content, at least not outside of Oceania. And finally, we have the mod Magna Europa Reloaded, which is not a total conversion mod per se, but a total overhaul mod of the map, which makes Europe truly enormous and removes all the other landmasses, giving you a true feel of the scope of the war in Europe, which I think could make for a heck of a European multiplayer campaign. Now that was a long list of my favorite total conversion mods on the Steam Workshop for Hearts of Iron 4, and I want to give a massive thanks to these modders and every modder out there, even the ones whose mods I haven't featured, for their incredible work and dedication. Together, they make our game so much more fun and long-lasting, and PC gaming would not be the same without them at all. If you enjoyed this video, I really hope you leave a like, a comment with your thoughts on this video and your favorite Hearts of Iron 4 mods, and remember to subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!